Hi there, Jeremy Shinewald here from mbaMission to talk to the GMAT Club Summer Spotlight Series about the Harvard Business School and Stanford Graduate School of Business essays, more particularly the What Matters and What More essays, probably the two most challenging essays that MBA applicants are going to have to write. We've been working on them for our almost 20 years in existence. We have a lot to say about them. We're going to go through two examples today in our presentation. And I think both those examples are from our book. So we wrote a book called What Matters and What More. It has two voices. It's with my colleague, Liza Wheel from Gatehouse Consulting. And in it, we have 50 essays, 50 critiques of those essays, again, including the two we're going to do today. You can purchase the book on our website. I'm not here to try to sell it to you. I just think that if you're here to learn more about this, it could be a helpful tool to you for you on this journey. So what are we going to talk about today? What makes these essays so challenging? We're going to dig in on that. We're going to talk about how to frame your content, and we'll talk about what it makes for a thoughtful narrative, and then we will wrap up. So here we go. What makes these essays so challenging? Well, maybe you're asking, what are these essays? So the first one is the cumbersomely worded Harvard essay, which is now has a 900-word limit. For years, it did not have a limit at all. That made it even more challenging. But now it's, as we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy for the Harvard Business School MBA program? We could edit that question in and of itself, I think. But nonetheless, that is the question. And what matters most to you and why in 650 words or about 650 words. We'll discuss that for the Stanford GSB. So what makes these essays so challenging? They're pretty open-ended questions, right? They're not asking you, what is your strength as a manager? Give us an example, right? That you know you were answering that question. Here, can you be certain that you're answering this amorphous prompt about, like, what else would we like to know about you? What more should we know about you? Can you really know that you're like nailing something in a powerful way about, what matters most to you in this world? So the right answer isn't necessarily, or the feeling of the right answer isn't necessarily there. They're in Harvard's non-question and Stanford's very specific question, they're kind of trying to get to the heart of your values and try to understand who you are as a person. It's tough to put that on the page for a stranger. It's really hard to strike the essence of why you exist and what your purpose is, or to figure out exactly what you want to offer someone in somewhat of a high stakes game. So you want to do this in a way that's straightforward. You want to avoid pandering. There isn't a right answer. There isn't a template, a prescribed answer. So don't try and do that. You kind of have to, let your spirit wander, as they say. So we'll talk about how to let your spirit wander intellectually, but also how to bring a framework to your thoughts so that you can start to write. So we'll talk about that in brainstorming. How do you approach what more? We often talk about like black and white versus color. So they're going to have your GPA, they're going to have your GMAT scores, they're going to have your short answer questions. The opportunity you have to offer them, they'll have your resume. The opportunity you have to give them a narrative, to tell them more about who you are, to give them the color, is through your essay. You should not feel compelled to talk about your career goals, why MBA, why HBS. Most applicants who write this essay do not talk about those things. It doesn't mean it's forbidden, but most often it's there because applicants feel like their essay is incomplete without it. And it just seems like a very, very strange thing. Talk about how you're trying to create something bigger than yourself, and HBS is a great school. It's not helpful. You'll see this in the essays, particularly the second essay that we talk about today, that you don't need to have massive wow power in your essays. You don't need to talk about something that no one has ever talked about before. You need to give a sense of who you are. And so we challenge you to read your essay aloud at the end, and to maybe give it to a parent or a close friend to read it aloud and say, does this represent who I am? When you read this, you're like, yeah, that's Jeremy. If you get to that point, you've probably done a pretty good job of this. what matters, it's about 650 words. It used to be 750. They've brought it down to 650. You can borrow 50 words from your Why Stanford or more theoretically. Most people try and keep it to their advised 650 words. You are probably not going to break ground thematically. You're probably not going to think of something that matters to you that has never mattered to anyone else who's ever written this essay. They've been using this essay for 20 years. You might even say to yourself, hey, this feels like a bit of a cliche. I'm talking about finding my own voice. I'm talking about, about creating something bigger than myself, or, finding a way to make my own contributions, whatever it might be. That's okay. The theme itself, the idea itself that you go with, the story that you show that is revealing of your core values, they don't need to be distinct thematically. They need to be distinct in terms of the content that supports your narrative and your thesis. So it's not a cliche if it's true to who you are. You don't need to start your essay by saying what matters most to me is living my truth. You don't need to finish your essay by saying, in summary, as you will see, what matters most to me is making my impact. That's not it should be obvious to someone who reads this what the point of your essay is. And if it's not, then maybe you haven't quite done your job. I mean, it's not like you get thrown out of the pool for explaining what the purpose of your essay is. And we do have people who've done that in our book, and it's not like it outright ruins your essay, but often you're telling something to someone that they already know if you're sharing at the end. And if you're sharing at the beginning, you're kind of scooping the mystery of what's coming. And again, take this, show it to someone, read it aloud. This does not need to have examples. You do not need to say, hey, I founded Twitter while climbing Mount Everest, and discovering the COVID vaccine. They're not expecting that. They're expecting you to share experiences that are commensurate with your point in life right now. So don't worry about that wow factor. And we'll see that again in the essays. So let's talk about how to frame your content. I would say before you even start writing, you want to be doing a lot of brainstorming, really thinking fundamentally about who you are as a person and what your core values are. Think about your greatest achievements. Think about your setbacks. They're not expecting you to be a perfect human being. They're not expecting you to never. I can assure you that every single person that Harvard admitted last year had a setback at some point in their life. They're not expecting you to have been the embodiment of perfection. What they want to know is that you're human and that you can grow, that you're capable of growing in your experiences. Think about your goals. You don't need to write them necessarily for Harvard, but think about them. What's motivating you? What's at the root of your goals? And then try to say, okay, well, what are some themes or what is my purpose in terms of what I do as you brainstorm? I think it's just good to sit back and just start by thinking. But after that, if you want to take this further, you should want to take this further, I would say almost do what I call like an inventory of rules. So say to yourself, okay, and this is simplified for a client that we worked with. It's so simplified that you couldn't possibly tell who this person is. But this person was a consultant and rose to a title of project manager, was the employee healthcare leader as an extracurricular activity in his professional environment, was a community theater board member in his community, and was a standout grandson in his personal life. It wasn't just an average grandson, it was truly a standout. Okay, these are the main rules that this person had. And this person will then break down each role into a little bit further and say, okay, well, I'm going to examine the six consulting projects that I worked on as I became a project manager, and I'm going to think about each one, and I'm going to think about what the challenges were and what my accomplishments were, and I'm going to look at the employee health committee leader experience. I'm going to talk about the struggles of getting it started, or communicating it across a large firm and getting people involved, or budgetary issues, or whatever it is, and I'm going to talk about the bumps and bruises along the way. And I'm going to do that, and I'm going to start to just bullet out the anecdotes within those experiences, because you're not going to write an essay saying, I'm a project manager at a consulting firm, but you might get to a story lurking under the surface there that is revelatory of who you are. So let's take a look at that project manager who was managing a team of 7 consultants at a failing company. So he was doing a restructuring. assignment. And, so what are some of the questions you might have? Well, how did you manage that team of 7? How did you, unify a team of 7 who were coming from all over? Maybe one individual challenged you and required specific attention. Maybe your client, because their failing was very difficult to deal with. Maybe the employees were demoralized and you couldn't motivate them to help you complete your study. Sorry, go back one slide. Maybe there were ethical issues that you faced as you, dealt with 2 people in the automotive sector, 2 automotive part manufacturers that were failing simultaneously. Working on 2 different consulting gigs at the same time, and you had information the other one couldn't have, whatever it might be. I don't know, but the point is there might have been ethical challenges, and not all these are going to result in essay fodder. But what I would say is, as you think about, and this is just the outputs here are going to be simplified because we can't go through every one of this individual's projects. But as you think about them, just bullet them out and then be ready to reflect on them and think about themes that run through your experiences. So here's a simplified output. Our project manager lobbied his client and created incentives for demoralized employees to complete their work. Good. Managed one high performer's ego and facilitated his growth while balancing team interest. Performed at the corporate level here, completed the project on schedule, earned follow-on business when his firm needed it, and when this other firm sort of needed it but might not have had a budget. Was the health committee leader, overcame internal skepticism and got the program going, and also separately is conducting wellness retreats with a rival firm and getting company morale going and getting people engaged, and is using these salad challenges, mukti yoga to try to create some company morale. Okay, I'm not going to read all these, but you can read the theater board ones yourself. You can always press pause on the slides. But this individual felt that he was a standout grandson, and that doesn't mean that he was any old grandson. This isn't accessible to anyone, and you have to be a standout. And so the personal is quite relevant in your process. They're trying to get a sense of who you are, and not anyone, not everyone, not anyone, except for this person, can tell the story of how he took his grandmother back to her home country of Hungary for 1 week and allowed her to live a dream of seeing her, birth home that she hadn't seen in 70 years, or whatever it might have been. I can't recall. This person was very close to his grandmother. She became ill, ran a fundraiser for a charity, and was able to raise a significant sum of money, and then was asked to be on the theater board. And so this was a story that, again, only this person can really tell, and tell it in a deeply personal way. So you've got these outputs from this multidimensional brainstorming, right? So you've got the professional stories, and there are more of them. You've got the stories from the health committee, you've got the stories from the theater board, you've got the stand-up grandson. Now you kind of have to organize them. And there are a couple of ways that we can suggest that you would complete your, you would sort of start to think about how to organize your life experiences. 3 of them that we highlight. So one of them is a thematic approach, right? So maybe this individual has a consistent track record of building morale, whether it's one-to-one, motivating his grandmother to go back home, helping to build company spirit through the health committee, lifting up demoralized employees. The key here isn't like, hey, here are 3 discrete anecdotes here where I've done the same thing, but is to show growth and change in your perspective, even if that is a theme. So you could say, I was inspired by my grandmother, who always lifted me up. She gave me some of the values that I had. I'm not saying this explicitly to her narrative, but this is kind of the simplified version of the story you're telling. And and I want to do something important for her, and I saw the impact on her, and it gave me a sense of, the kind of role I could have in others. And wherever I went, I tried to find my way to impact my environment, to impact people around me. So when I finally got settled to work, I started the health committee, and I saw people, I saw it affect people. And, so you can write about, move that into the theater, which was a toxic environment. And you could talk about how you help navigate that and get the organization back on track. The theme is it can only work if it's authentic. And if you are moving the story forward, it won't work if it's just kind of like, here again, here are sort of three anecdotes side by side. Enjoy. We have to learn about your values and what motivates you and propels you through that theme. Similarly, or entirely differently, sorry, is the single individual accomplishment. And this is one where your experience may kind of do the talking for you. You might have a story that's so strong that it is revealing of your values. So, maybe the story of the grandmother who couldn't travel alone. Maybe it's a story about deep respect for other human beings, a sense of adventure, open-mindedness, as this person went to a small town that he'd never been to, and used his vacation days to do something for another person. Altruism comes out, curiosity, intellectual sides come out as you talk about how you engage with the culture. This is often, there needs to be something really, really unusual and strong for it to be a single accomplishment that you're going to tell. And this is, I would say, a good approach for someone who is from a very overrepresented field, that they have that kind of story, because the private equity associate probably doesn't want to tell thematic stories of his experience in private equity. So maybe this is an opportunity to show an entirely different side that works against type. This is an approach. The last one is discussing a personal journey, or an inflection point, as we often call it, and or your inflection points. And it's you don't need to tell a full biography. You can't do that. There's not enough space. So here you're going to be thinking of like moments in your life where there was change that defined who you are and kind of changed your perspective and allowed you to grow from there. Again, maybe going back to the examples we have. I entered the professional world uncertain of whether I could be an impact player. And I saw an opportunity to start the healthcare committee, and that made me realize that I could be, an impact player in the professional environment. And it totally changed my perspective, what it meant to be a mature professional individual, and emboldened me to go and take leadership roles in other areas in my community. And so you're kind of talking about how there are these moments where things change for you, and you have a greater sense of awareness about yourself. They're hard to define. They're specific to the individual, but again, it's just important that you ensure that they're not a biography, but are enhancing and opening our perspective, about who you are as a person, allowing your values to breathe in some ways. So those are three approaches: thematic approach, the single accomplishment, and the inflection points. And let's go through and share an example. First, just a few points. We'll share two examples. Show versus tell. Let the story do the work for you. The language does not need, you don't need to use $10 adjectives. The language does not need to be crazy sophisticated. You can keep it simple, keep it honest. If you have good stories, they can tell themselves. You don't need to say, I was the greatest grandson, because you can say, for 20 years, I've been hearing about a dream to return home to a country that hadn't been visited in 60 years. It's totally fine. There's nothing that sophisticated about the language. It's very, very simple and direct. And now we're gonna walk into that story. We don't need to hear, I was awesome because, and these stories should be reflective. We want to hear about what you learned, who you are, and what you stand for. That's kind of the goal. Again, not hear that you are awesome, but hear who you are. So the Stanford example we're about to go through, and I'll move the slides forward. You can stop to read this as we go, and then come back to my thoughts. But the Stanford story is under the old word limit of 750 words, because they changed it, and this is a very good example. And it's a thematic approach. So here we go. Feel free to pause as we go to read. Okay, so I'll assume that you've read this, and so what do we like about this essay? I'm sure you had your own thoughts. First of all, this is a risky essay. This is one that maybe will what one person loves, someone else might not love. But sometimes people read this essay and in our book, and they say, wow, like I'm not so sure I like this guy. But I think others, and the Stanford GSP Commission Missions Committee did like this guy and accepted him. Others, I think, see an individual whose quest for truth is deeply empowering and is actually helpful to himself and to others. So this wouldn't work if this person were to say, and I hope when you read this, you said, okay, this is a story about truth. This is a thematic story of an individual who seeks his truth. This is an individual who is so passionate about truth that he actually goes to the effort of having himself removed from the baptismal book in his church. But he's not so dogmatic that he's saying, like, I know my truth and I'm not listening to anyone else. This is my life, my story. And in fact, I think one of the appealing parts of this is that he talks about how if you're going to live your truth, you have to be open to others pushing back. And that's why he says that he found that in his advisor, Professor Sarkinis, who was known to even intimidate. He was willing to find someone who was an intimidating force. But I just accepted that he pushed students to reconsider their thoughts and reveled in his constant challenges. So this individual is thoughtful about soliciting challenges, just as he's seeking truth. He's seeking to shake up his worldview. Additionally, I think that again, there's a spirit of helping others through it. As this person uses numbers and information to find the truth about a couple of swindles, as he calls them, strong language. He's defending shareholders. He's defending his country, his bank. He is he's speaking out and courageously in order to empower others. And so I think the overall message is actually very positive, even if there is some risk in here. Where there's risk, there's reward. The story is very much a narrative. As I grew older, I increasingly felt that as a person of science, I couldn't reconcile being committed to an organization founded broadly on beliefs, right? Just sharing his voice, sharing his narrative, sharing how things happened. The language isn't that sophisticated. And again, I think maybe I pointed out, but this is a second language speaker, and there are a few idiosyncrasies of expression, but that's okay because it adds to the genuine nature of this person's essays. So I really like this. There's some risk, but I really do like it a lot. Another individual who immigrated, here's an HBS essay that is, I believe, just under the current word limit. I'll let you read it. So please go back and you can pause before we change the slides if you want to read them. But again, this is an individual who, what I like about this one is, again, very straightforward. It's a narrative. I immigrated from Eastern Europe at the age of 11 without speaking a word of English. Right? That's not anyone can write that. I mean, anyone who has that experience can write that. But this person is, there's no language here that is inaccessible to others. But this person brings us to their story, and it's a challenging story, and yet it's not one where this person is asking for pity. And in fact, this story is one of wound and redemption, right? So this person had this very challenging experience, adjusting and adapting, and makes it his goal to integrate through student government and through being a community lead, and getting involved in his college, and then ultimately advocating for others, again through government, through being a teacher's assistant. It's a consistent theme in this person's life, that this tough moment, this inflection point was deeply empowering going forward, and we find that this person is an excellent TA, but is also thoughtful about others, as an effective mentor in the financial world, or even just adding small things like March Madness or World Cup pools to his professional life. He's a culture builder and a culture carrier, and that's something that is important to him based on that one experience that was an inflection point that really changed his life. Again, the language is very, very straightforward. After Alexander, a student with a learning disability, failed his accounting course, the professor asked me if I would help him with the classes he retook it. There's nothing sophisticated about that language, and there is also the occasional work of language in here, and that is totally fine. This person is leading the the team offsites, and at the end he says, "I know what it's like to be on the outs. I strive to make an impact on others by helping them be on the in." That's as close as we come to kind of a summary sentence that expresses the purpose, but it still fundamentally works because it's simple. It's a truth. So again, it's not verboten. It's okay. Okay. Speaking of okay, that brings us to the end. I'm I'll say very briefly, very proud of the firm we've built. We're the number one firm on Poets and Quants, the number one firm with 1,500 verified five-star reviews on GMAT Club. They verify the reviews. It's, I believe, at least 600 or 700 more than our nearest competitor verified. We are just doing things at a level that others are not doing them. Quite proud of the things we've done. And if you enjoyed this and you want to take us up on a free consultation, do it with me, any other member of our team. If you have questions about this, feel free to reach out through that free consultation. And what can we say? Good luck with your applications. Enjoy the rest of the Summer Spotlight series. I hope that you're all admitted in the year that comes. Again, best of luck.